them to do their job. When you review what did occur, and I meant every word of this, I believe you will be in admiration for the patience displayed by many despite the length of time and events they were subjected to. I know of no other families in the state that would have tolerated as much despite the impact on their families and environment. The adoption of the proposed exemptions before you today will clearly add to the distrust of government regulators and the perception that we are not listening. I hope that some of the information presented will be instrumental in beginning the task of establishing a trust relationship with members of the community affected by past geothermal activities as well as other concerned communities. To grant exemptions to Chapter 343 along with the passing of Act 97 counters almost every professional recommendation on the drilling and location of exploratory wells for geothermal development. I contend that we cannot have a policy of geothermal development that reflects that the priority of the safety of the people and the environment has a lower priority than expediency. Yes. The communities of this state rely on government to ensure that the support used in development of geothermal will be done with the safety of the people and the environment as the highest priority. In conclusion, I will say this. For those who know me, you know that I'm asking you to get more involved, but I'm asking you to, as I told Bob and Patricia, others out there, including Albertini, I don't like violence. I don't like confrontation of a certain kind. I hate disrespect in regards to people, regardless of their position. So I ask of you to do it in a way that will gain respect of others, because you will need the support of others. I consider, and I've always said it for as long as I can remember, that war is the greatest failure of mankind. And I believe that with everything I can feel. And I'm not talking about war between countries, just war between people. I thank you for your participation in doing this, for all of you that taking the time to be here. I have a friend that I consider one of the wisest people that I have talked to, and he's an international consultant, and I just talked to him to guide me, make sure that I stay on track, because we always seem to sway. And taught me from a long time ago to always remember that government should be the extension of the people. And I think that's where we've gone wrong. For the campaign is over, and I had believe it or not, a great time on people relationship. And I truly do want to thank you. I truly want to thank you for all the love you gave me. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. And I want to tell you, Puna Pono heard him loud and clear, and we've been working on Act 97.
Eyes up, Hawaii!
Sorry. Puna Pono is going to be working on Act 97. I talked to Russell Ruderman a little while ago, Harry, and he said, come see him. He's excited about working with you and with us. So, obviously we're going to have to, if anybody here has experience at the legislature, we're going to be needing that. We're going to be moving this to the state level for sure. So, also, I still do want to say on 292 that, it's a health and safety issue. Nobody can be kept up 24 hours a day for months and months. And we need to make sure the county council understands that it, you know, if you can't sleep, if your kids can't sleep, you can't work, you can't go to school. And so this isn't about saving PG&E money or any of those things. This is about health and safety of the community, and that is what our county council is supposed to do. Number one is protect the health and safety of this community. And if we can't sleep at night, they have to recognize that issue, and they cannot ignore that, and we have to make sure they understand that. So there's a lot of issues going on with geothermal. We have permitting, rulemaking. December 6th, we're going to be in front of the Planning Commission for rulemaking. But something that's just came up is low frequency noise. And it's a new thing for Puna Pono, but we have somebody here tonight that understands it, and he's going to come and explain that to you guys. And it's kind of a new thing. So Sid Singer,
Aloha, everyone. I'm a medical anthropologist. Many of you know me since we've been living here about 20 years. And what I do is I'm also the director of the Institute for the Study of Culturogenic Disease. And what culturogenic diseases is diseases caused by the culture. And there's a common, this whole issue we're dealing with here is a culture-caused disease. What's happening is there's a common theme to these types of diseases. There are problems that are created by industry. All sorts of industries create all sorts of problems. When you have very huge, powerful industries, they work with the government to try to limit negative impacts on the industries. And there's usually a lack of research on these impacts. The reason is, the more research that's done, the easier it is to sue. And for liability reasons, these industries do not want to have a lot of research done on what they're doing to people. Well, when it comes to low-frequency noise, that is a product of lots of different industries. But drilling is known to cause these LFNs, low-frequency noise, and also compressors and air conditioners and other operations at geothermal. They all create LFNs. Now, let me explain what LFNs are. In the spectrum of sound, we hear a very short spectrum. And below that spectrum is low frequency that we cannot hear, but can be at the same intensity or even greater than the sounds we can hear. And the energy of that sound wave still affects our bodies. See, the noise, the sound that we hear is a reflection of our eardrums. But when you're dealing with being inside a field of vibrational energy, which is what we're talking about here, your body resonates, and even your cells resonate. And the most damage from this resonance is done in low frequency and infrasound, which is, infrasound is at 20 hertz and lower. Low frequency is considered 500 hertz and lower. Our hearing starts to get really bad at those low frequencies. So people don't hear this and they're not aware of it. And one of the other things about low frequency noise is it travels farther than sounds than higher frequencies. You all experience this, for example, when you hear a boombox car going by, you hear the bass way before the car comes. And so what happens is the bass travels really far. So if people are hearing geothermal 1, 2, or 3 miles from the source, they could have low frequency noise vibrating them way beyond that. So this isn't just an issue of people living around geothermal plants, wherever they may be. This is an issue that can affect people 5, 10, or even more miles away. And you won't even realize it because you don't hear it. This is a form of very insidious noise pollution that eats away at your life and your health. And this has been documented. There's a group in Portugal that's done a lot of work on this for 30 years. In the back, I have a page on this information with a quote from this person that I'm going to read. I've been communicating with the author of one of the people in this team, and she's been having threats against her. You know, it's not just geothermal, it's also windmills. They create low-frequency noise that can travel miles, and it affects wildlife too. In fact, in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of concern about low-frequency noise because of jets, Concorde, and all that kind of thing. And there were departments created for noise abatement on the federal level, but these were defunded in the 80s. And because industry doesn't really want this to be something focused on. So there have been a lot of studies showing what LFNs do. And what I interpret this as is, and I want to say, don't panic, okay? Because we don't have the data to show whether or not LFNs of the magnitude that can harm people are being generated by PGV. The reason we don't have the data is because all of the sound measurements that are made today, most of them, and the Environmental Protection Agency does this, they're made using an A-weighted meter. And what that means is they bias the meter so that the sounds that it detects reflect human hearing. So that the idea is they want to know how noisy is this for people. Well, we're only going to look at the range of sound that people are sensitive to. That means they ignore very high frequencies and low frequencies. So when they take these measurements and there's low frequency in the environment or in your house or whatever, and they're using these sound meters that only are biased towards what you hear, you can be blasted with 100 decibels of low frequency noise and it won't register, okay? So they're underestimating all the low frequency noise, and people in the field are complaining about that. And for any of the politicians here, I think there should be legislation changing our rules on the state and county level to require that decibel readings are not made with an A-weighted meter, which the law states. It requires A-weighted. You can't use other types of linear measurements that consider these low frequency noises. Well, what does this frequency do to you? It essentially vibrates your cells and makes them move, and it causes the space between the cells to thicken. Imagine your body is being shaken, and your body wants to compensate by increasing the glue between the cells to hold your body together. And one of the first signs of vibroacoustic disease, which is disease that's caused by this, one of the first signs include respiratory problems. So when we're dealing with hydrogen sulfide gas, and you have vibration damaging your lungs anyway, it could exacerbate the hydrogen sulfide. So levels that might be normal, might not bother a healthy person, may very well bother a person who's suffering from vibroacoustic disease. The other thing it does is it affects your heart. And one of the good things about this is we can do definitive tests on whether people have vibroacoustic disease, and they're not invasive. You can do an echocardiogram, where they take a picture of your heart, and they look for thickening in the pericardium, which is the sac surrounding the heart. And what happens is people typically, and children get this, and vibration of fetuses in the uterus cause the fetus to develop these problems. So if there are 10-year-old kids that live near a place that has LFNs, and these children already have thickened tissue in their hearts. And it's like a definitive sign without inflammation. It's like the body doesn't have an inflammatory thing like it's dealing with a disease. It's just thickening. And what happens is when your body thickens like that over time, you get high blood pressure, you start getting other diseases, heart disease, you get lung disease, and mental and nervous disorders. In fact, rage reactions. And I'll tell you an interesting experiment for people who didn't think infrasound, which you can't hear. See, there's this false cultural assumption that the industry uses to try to ignore this. They say, if you can't hear it, it can't hurt you. That's extremely naive. And it's like saying if you can't see it, it can't hurt you. But we already know that there are wavelengths of light, like infrared and ultraviolet, that you can't see, but they affect you deeply, very deeply. And these LFNs affect you very deeply. So they did this study, this experiment, where they took a group of people, and they had a concert, a classical music concert. And they had the same concert with another group of people, except underneath, subliminally basically, they played 20 hertz sound at a very loud frequency, a very loud amplitude. People couldn't hear it, but boy did they feel it. They were anxious, they felt agitated, they felt annoyed, and they didn't know why. So people also will suffer from these vibrations. It affects the brain. It causes just cognitive problems. People their brains don't function as well. Their memory goes. They have, besides rage reactions, they get depression, they get suicide. Now, so there's also another thing, is increased cancers. The immune system gets damaged by these LFNs also. It actually causes the DNA in the cells to cleave and cross over and increases mutations and cancers. Animals and people living near fracking drilling rigs on the mainland. I mean, this is an epidemic all over the country. When people live near these, the animals and the people living around these drilling rigs are getting sick. And it's being known, and there are lawsuits now developing on this. There are countries that are developing low-frequency noise regulations. But when I look at the literature on this, they're almost all outside of the United States. It's a lot of Europe and Russia, Poland, Portugal. These are the countries that care about this, and it was first recognized, by the way, as part of an industrial problem. Airline pilots and flight attendants get a lot of low-frequency noise in planes, and it's because of the wind actually vibrating the fuselage of the jet, and the faster it goes, the greater the low-frequency noise. And it's very high, and it causes these people to get strokes, and that's another problem, stroke. So they start breaking apart because of this LFN, and as they get older, the disease really sets in. It's very important that before this issue, the reason I think this is so important for everything we're doing here is that it's not only PGV. We're going to be exposed to LFNs from multiple geothermal drilling sites. And if you have multiple sites sending out low-frequency noise, people will be in nodes where sound interference patterns with sound could be even greater. And they will feel like, I feel a hum, or I feel, and they might not feel it, but they may feel it. And people, this is also very interesting, is why I was occupationally associated with disc jockeys. And people go to raves, be aware that LFN in those rooms is extremely high, and it affects people. It can affect children. People in these cars with the boom boxes, it can affect children. I think the more this gets researched, there should be regulations against that kind of a thing. But living near these plants, you have no break. And that's one of the reasons Bill 292 was so good. It gave a break. The research shows that if you at least have a break from the noise and get away, then it reduces the effect of the vibroacoustic disease, which, by the way, sets in after a few years, and as time goes by, it gets even worse. By 10 years, it's really full-blown problems. So we have to get measurements of these LFNs, but the problem is, even if we get the measurements, there are no guidelines that say 60 decibel of low-frequency noise is safe or not safe. They haven't studied that. They don't want to study that. They don't want to get that detail. But the researcher that's done, this team that's done the most research told me that when people are in low intensity, low frequency noise, so it's not that high decibel, and they live in it and sleep in it, it's worse than people who work in it during the day. Which means that PGV workers who leave the area at night may not have the same negative effects as a housewife or a husband that works at home, sleeps there, and is like most of the time in the neighborhood near PGV at a lower intensity of sound than being right in the plant. So these are very important concerns that really, I think, add to the whole, the health study concept. What should be studied? Should we just be looking at gas? I think that this issue adds to the gas issue because people can suffer from this without having to have any exposure to hydrogen sulfide. And if they do have exposure to that, it would probably be worse. And it affects children, it affects everybody, and it could affect people miles from any of these geothermal plants. See, essentially, I think from a bigger perspective, what's going on is all energy production has a cost to the environment and to health, even solar. We're really very happy to have solar panels, and I live on a completely off-the-grid solar system. But if you read about how solar panels